Hi, everybody. Hi. Welcome. We are going to pass the basket. So, Molly, at some point, will you start that around? This isn't a meeting, it's a workshop, but the money we're just given to the club to support the club to help keep the doors open and the air conditioning on, which I guess on Monday it wasn't because of the roof work. It's probably really hot in here. So just a little bit of a announcement. I'm taping this, I'm videotaping it. So when you speak, if you could speak loudly but use your first name only. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with these videos. I think I might YouTube them or something just to make them more widely available for people in the Al-Anon program who might be interested in more information on how to use the big book of AA and the 12 by 12 from AA to work steps in Al-Anon. So just be aware that that's going to happen. And we are going to do the second part of step 4 tonight, and Chris has graciously agreed to come back and help us with that. So I'm excited about that. I think he did such a good job last week. Reading list for step 4, part 2. I would start in the big book at the bottom of page 67 through paragraph 3 on page 68, and then paragraph 3 on 70 to the end of the chapter. I'm pretty sure Chris will be referencing some of the information in the big book. And I was looking at the AA 12 by 12 on step 4 too, and man, I think we could do another 2 weeks just looking at the information in the 12 by 12 on step 4. It's so darn good. So maybe at the end of tonight, I'll ask the group if they feel like they'd like to hang out in step 4 a little longer. For me, it was the step on which everything pivoted. It's a really important step. So we can take a little more time with it if we want to, and I think we'll make that a group decision. We'll make it very democratic. I brought you some more musical references for step 4. I've already talked about Carrie Newcomer. She's got a song called You Can Do This Hard Thing. You can do this hard thing. It's not easy, I know, but I believe that it's so. You can do this hard thing. Step 4 is challenging for most of us. It takes a lot of courage to do a fearless and searching moral inventory of yourself. Hold On is another Carrie Newcomer song that I really like. And then I put Revolution by the Beatles up there, kind of because I thought it was kind of funny. Because, step 4 is revolutionary for me. It's like, buckle your seatbelt, hold on to yourself. We're going to do step 4. So that's that. I brought a couple poems to read, so I'm going to read them really quick. I'm going to tell you a little bit why I chose these poems to bring in. And then Chris is going to launch into doing a 4th step fear inventory. Last week, she's not here. Uh-oh. Last year we had a brave soul come forward and do the 4 columns on the resentment inventory, and it was so touching to watch her do that. It brought up a lot of emotion in her, and it was very brave. So what we're hoping to do tonight is continue this inventory and do the fear part of the inventory, and there she is. We were just talking about you. So that's kind of the plan for this evening. So what is passed on is the first poem I'm going to read you. Wonder where my glasses are. I might need them. No, I'll be all right. Are they reading glasses?
Well, no.
Sort of. Nope. Oh, my husband. Our kids laugh at us because I take Jerry's glasses right off his face. Sometimes it's a little weird. So I'm going to wear boy glasses and read this. So the reason I thought we would read this poem is I had a friend, and we went to South Dakota together, which is where she grew up, and she told me this wild story in the car. Almost couldn't believe what she told me. It was such a story about family history and how we get trapped in family history and how we get trapped in belief systems that our families give us. And I think Chris referenced this last week, but when we're children, our parents are God to us. right? Like when we're little, we don't really have a religious affiliation, right, or belief, even if we go to church. But it's our parents, really, that represent the power of God to us. And if we grow up in a family where there's alcoholism, or there's extreme dysfunction, or there's just parents that aren't able to do their job very well, you know, the children are really affected by that. And this woman told me this story about the way she grew up, and she did it with just sort of this flat, as if it had happened to someone else. And so this poem came out of that story she told me, and it's called What Is Passed On. Joan's mother let her run wild in the Black Hills, lunch in satchel, pony clad with blanket and girl, its spine a ridge she held. At home, the piano, something of the pines bend and stretch in her wrist, soar of hawks sway in her shoulders, music unruly as her day. When Joan's father was home, silence fogged the house, his book a stone in her lap. Prayers after supper, the swift reach if she faltered. Hymns on Sunday, the drag and plow of salvation, and the stillness of Joan's body when he was there. Joan's been married. The first left her holding her belly, behind on rent. The next took every dime she'd saved, chasing something rolling south. He sent postcards full of exclamation, divorced her from 3 states away. The third was cuffed, pulled down the front stairs. Joan paid the lawyer, went to work. Joan still visits her mother, driving past acres of sunflowers not harvested, dried by frost and wind. The flowers stand like soldiers, obedient withered arms and leaves, the face of each 1,000 eyes. One gunshot aimed carefully could take the same row of seeds across the entire field. Joan stops the car, parts barbed wire. She lifts a bowed head, runs the nub of her thumb across a black raised row. Next spring, saved seeds bring forth the same plant. What is passed on grows beneath the sun's circling fire, takes its shape from what came before. So part of my excitement about step 4 is I dive into that writing and I discover things that I didn't know about myself, about what I believe to be true, about the way I operate in the world. And what happens, I think one of the first workshops we did, I said, you cannot change something you cannot see. You have to see it. You have to see it in order to change it. So the steps for me are about a lot of different things, but it's had a lot to do with kind of healing the map that my parents gave me. So you're growing up in a house, right? Your parents don't say to you, we're providing you with a map that's going to kind of run the rest of your life. Congratulations, right? So if you have really healthy parents that are love-based and okay, the map you get is that too. If you have parents that are not, the map that you get is pretty funky, right? Can be pretty funky. So my journey through the steps has had a lot to do with looking at that stuff. Like, I love the words fearless, and honest. And Chris talked last week about the importance of knowing that we're not bad. We're simply frightened. Like, we're not bad people. We're not. I personally believe there are no bad people. I do believe that people that are frightened can behave very badly, right? But it's because they're frightened, not because they're bad. So we put aside the idea that the inventory condemns us in any way, and we get curious and excited about what we're going to find out. So I think I mentioned before too that doing the inventory, it's like somebody gave me the keys to the kingdom. They created freedom in my life, and I had always felt so trapped by everything that was going on. So when I was doing a lot of work with my sponsor in the steps, I happened to be kind of going to school to learn how to write poetry at the same time. And the poetry that kind of came out of me had everything to do with the step work, which was kind of cool. It was directly related to it. So this is kind of a poem about freedom for me, and again, about kind of literally rising above your childhood maybe and starting to see things in a different way. So this poem's called Climbing. The girl's feet tugged her to a fleet run each morning. The oak across the field pulled her with loose gravity. Its green place of duff and density gave her ease. Cloister of leafy skirts, trunk, its rough brown ribbons cool against the heat of her face. The base, where anchors of roots began a long and tangled dive beneath the earth. The climb, fingers like small pearls reaching toward green flags of freedom. Billows of lime-tinged ochre, a vertical path up and further up, until she could see the rectangle of her house like a crayon drawing. Above her, endless azure spilled like paint. The stretch of blue poured into her shuttered heart a flicker of quiet light, like the idea of a future. So, welcome Chris up. You ready? And he's going to take us into the fear inventory. And I'm going to stand by him so that the mic picks him up. And we're going to limit him to this much territory to move.
Yeah, really coached me up on that. Can I use your book?
Yeah, absolutely.
Are there any other copies?
Of the,
I have lots of them, so I can share mine. Just one, please. Thank you.
welcome.
Wunderbar.
Okay, so when I do inventory with somebody, I like to check in with them after what the week was like as far as son-in-law issues.
It was, it was pretty, I woke up the next morning and there was something that came up and I felt resentment. It was resentment, and I said that prayer and just kind of like looked for ways to, so, and that's basically how I've been like running the week, so.
Good. So there was definitely a change of some type.
Yes, and I had my son Saturday night, or my grandson Saturday night, we spent the whole night together. It was wonderful, we had so much fun, so, yeah.
So you got what you needed in
Yep.
the end.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, that is awesome. Cool, thank you. Okay, so a few new faces this week, so can't go back and rehash last week. There's not enough time. When I do step workshops, I usually do 90 minutes and open-ended till whenever, so we crank on it and keep going. But we'll try to stay focused. Am I moving on you, Jerry?
No, you're good.
I've never worked in front of a camera, so it's not something I'm mindful of. All right, so I'm trying to find the right page. There. Okay, what did we say last week were the two most common manifestations of self? Ready?
Fear,
And?
anger.
Resentment? Correct. Good. Were you here last week?
Yes.
Good. There's three parts to the four-step inventory. Resentment inventory, fear inventory, and sex inventory, relationship inventory. Okay? So in the big book, there's those three parts, so we don't want to leave out the third part of the relationship inventory and the sex inventory. It's different, but similar to what we're talking about. Okay, so bottom of page 67. Okay, now in the handout that I gave you, there's 4 columns of fear inventory, and we have 4 columns of resentment inventory. These are meant to have continuity. Okay? So when we do the last part of the 4th column and the 3rd column, we identify fears in both columns. We have fears that show up in the 3rd column, and we admit that we were afraid in the 4th column. Okay? Now, in the third step, when you guys went through the third step and it talked about the nature of self-will, the root cause of our problem when we go into the 12 steps is self, manifested in various ways. Self-will, self-reliance. And there's a line in that text in the third step where it talks about being driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-pity, self-seeking. And we step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. Okay? One of the hardest concepts I had to get into my head is that even when I had good intentions and I thought I was being loving, I could still be in self-will and trying to help people for self-seeking reasons. Okay? And that is because I was driven by fears I didn't know I had. And they were sometimes enmeshed with delusions in which I actually saw things that weren't true, right? And that's what my mind was doing. And when we do the inventory process, we're refining and chiseling and breaking down root causes and conditions. What's blocking me off from my higher power? What's blocking me off from other human beings? Okay? And it very often boils down to fear. Okay? So once I've been through the step work a little bit, sometimes there's a scary thing that happens, not scary, a dangerous thing that happens after somebody writes a resentment inventory. They get relief. Okay? But nothing's actually changed, has it? We haven't asked for a defect of character to be removed. We haven't worked on a fear and done any prayer work around a fear. And so one of the big pitfalls that I ran into when I first started doing inventory is just this much of it opened my eyes enough to where I thought I understood the problem. I thought that I had clarity and I could just think my way around it next time. I'm just going to act different. Okay? Logical, isn't it? If that causes this problem, I'm not going to do that anymore. Right? And that would work for a week or so. A month maybe, and then it would come up again and seemingly out of left field. And what I found is that when I am in the grips of fear, whether I know it or don't know it, I can't behave differently on a consistent, ongoing period of time because those fears are driving forces. Think of an axle that's just cranking, and you're hitting the gas, and that axle, that drive shaft is just going to crank and drive you, and it's like pushing me to do things I really don't want to do, things I'm really trying not to do. I'm trying not to be controlling. I'm trying not to be selfish. I'm trying not to be manipulative, okay? And I can't. And so then I delude myself into thinking my intentions are good. I'm just trying to be nice. I'm just trying to be considerate, self-sacrificing. But in the back, even if I do have good intentions, there's something fear-based that's driving me. And what that does is it causes people to posture defensively. My fear solicits defensiveness out of people. Okay? Why don't relationships work when I'm afraid? Because it solicits self-will or defensiveness out of people I'm trying to relate to. So that's why virtuous good intentions in self-will don't usually work. See? And it frustrates us because we can't get what we need out of it, and they won't listen to us, and that kind of stuff. Conversely, in the absence of fear, I can show up and say the same thing and get a completely different result in somebody. Okay? And I was in sales and sales management for the first part of my career in business. And when I went in and I needed somebody to buy something from me, I needed a sale to meet a goal or to make money or to satisfy my boss, people would run out the back door and I couldn't sell very well. And then I read this book about doing it for free, doing it without attachment, doing it unconditionally, trusting God to take care of me, and I'm just here to help. And I practiced that for a number of years, and became a very successful salesman, a very successful sales manager on that simple principle that I can't sell when I'm afraid. Okay? And I can sell just about anything if I'm there to help unconditionally. Does that make sense? Guess what? That applies to relationships as well. When I am there to barter security in a relationship, any kind of relationship, barter self-esteem, we call it love, but we're really trading security or self-esteem or compensating for our own issues, and we call it love. When I'm there with fear, that relationship is compromised. At the best, I can just get my needs met temporarily, but never long term, and then the relationships fail. But when I show up unconditionally, and I don't have fear it doesn't that I sacrifice my needs. It's just that I'm not afraid I'm not going to get what I need met, what I need to be met. Does that make sense? So I can't emphasize how important this is. And unlike self-help ideas out there, there's a recipe to immediately start outgrowing fear. Right? Last week I emphasized that there were instructions, a recipe to follow to master resentment. Right? And we talked about it, and she went home and worked on it and is still working on it, right?
Yes.
But we don't want to leave her hanging because there's a couple of fears that came up in that process as well, right? So if I don't take the fears that I identified in the previous inventory process into the fear inventory, okay, I'm leaving it half-baked. I haven't finished the process of getting rid of what is blocking me off from my higher power. I've taken it down a layer or two, and I've got down to some harder truths about I got a part in this now because I'm afraid. Okay? But now I'm not going to change unless you got a solution to that fear that you just helped me see. Okay? And that's what we're here to talk about. Is what is the actual solution to the fear? Okay? Notice that the word fear is bracketed alongside the difficulties with Mr. Brown, Mrs. Jones, the employer, and the wife. This short word somehow touches every aspect of our lives. That is not an understatement. It was an evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence was shot through with it. Okay, so when I'm working with people on fear inventory, I remind them that when we're working on a fear inventory at work, that fear at work is woven into your existence in multiple areas of your life. And if we can overcome that fear in this particular area, we're also working on it in other areas, okay, at the same time. So no matter where it comes up, it's worthy of our attention where it's at. And know that you're working on it in multiple areas of your life at the same time. Because I don't have to work on the same fear in every single area of my life. God's efficient, right? If I ask God to take away a fear here, it's going to take the whole thread out of my existence. That's what we're after. Does that make sense? Okay. It set into motion trains of circumstances which brought us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve. But did not we ourselves. There's a line in the third step that talks about anytime I find myself in a place to be hurt, I look back and find where I've made a decision based on self that later put me in a place to be harmed. Okay, and anybody that knows me knows that that's a fundamental principle by which I live. Okay? If I find myself in a situation where I feel like I've been harmed, I start retracing my footsteps to look for and disprove this theory that I made a decision based on self somewhere back here that later put me in a place to be harmed. And as I said last week, my definition of self is fear. That I am almost primarily or almost exclusively, almost, not absolutely, almost exclusively selfish or self-seeking when I am afraid, because I am afraid. Okay? So if I want to not be selfish, if I want to not be self-seeking, I have to not be afraid, right? I have to trust that it's all going to work out even if it doesn't go my way. Does that make sense? And so I have yet to find a single case where I feel like I have been harmed and I didn't put myself in that position with a decision I made based on fear in the past, okay? One of my favorite questions that I ask people that have had difficult things happen to them is, did you have an intuition before it happened? You know? And it's remarkable. 95% of them say yes without even a second thought. Without a second thought, oh yeah, I thought that was going to happen. Hello, what's God supposed to do? You know, God's saying, yeah, don't turn left, okay? But I'm afraid I'm going to be late, or I might hurt somebody's feelings if I don't show up on time, so I turn left anyway, and boom, crash happens. What's my relationship with God? How is God supposed to talk to me and guide me around troubles and problems and things that I live in fear of, right? Because my concept of God, which we're trying to build and develop in the 12-step process, is a blank canvas. And I'm going to show you how in this inventory process we start to put the broad strokes on that God concept. Because I truly believe, folks, I truly believe that when you really do the inventory like it's talked about, you're painting a picture of your current concept of God, okay? And it ain't working, or you wouldn't be writing fear inventory, right? This is what my real relationship with my higher power actually looks like, and the degree with which I trust it, see? And if I think God's going to abandon me, and I'm afraid I'm going to be abandoned in a work relationship or a love relationship or a family relationship, guess what? My concept of God is kind of messed up, isn't it? See, because how can I trust God when I believe God abandons people, right? And here's why. And I can give you a list of where I thought I was abandoned. See? But this starts to paint this picture of this concept of God that's flawed. See? And then by the time I get done with the process, I can start expanding that concept of God, amending that concept of God, introducing new ideas. Because the books I read, the teachers I learn from, say that God's love is unconditional. God doesn't abandon me. Well, where the hell did that idea come from? That's way back when, like Alice was saying, I took a parental concept of conditional love, or inherited a fear of abandonment, transpose that onto my higher power, and I'm trying to reconcile my adult life with this messed up concept of God that I don't really know I have. Okay? But I want to trust God, but I can't. And I could tell you stories all night long of how I came to that realization over and over and over again. And as a result of coming to that awareness, my concept of God has expanded over and over and over. And my relationship and my ability to trust my higher power has expanded through that process. Okay? Now, there I go off on a tangent. This is why my workshops take so long. Set into motion trains of circumstances which brought us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve. But did not we ourselves set the ball rolling? Sometimes we think fear ought to be classed with stealing. It seems to cause more trouble. I joke that I've developed a healthy fear of fear, right? Because when I show up afraid, bad things are coming down the track, okay? I became so respectful of this concept that today, if I know that I'm afraid, if I'm in self-will, and I've got an important decision or important meeting coming up tomorrow, the next day, I cancel it. I postpone it until I can do the spiritual work I need to do. Because if I show up in that state of being, if I try to work on a relationship, if I try to solve my problems, work on my problems while I'm afraid, it's going to set into trains of emotion, trains of circumstances. I'm going to feel victimized by it. See? So I hit the stop button on the merry-go-round, and I stopped participating in the game because I can't win it. I can't win. If I've learned anything in business or in life, don't play games you can't win unless you want to lose. So I stopped the stop button. I hit that emergency button on the merry-go-round and stop it. And then I go retreat back into wherever I need to retreat to, get with a sponsor, get with my closed-mouth trusted friends, do my work, come out of that with a vision of God's will to carry into that exact situation that I'm afraid of. Then I show up. And guess what? 95% of my self-imposed crises that are demanding decisions don't need to be made today. There's hardly a situation, hardly an event that I have to make or decide to now. Even in parenting I've got 2 adult sons, 28 and 24. I have practiced for many years not parenting in the moment until I have time to process my reaction, right? And then I come back and say, all right, here's what I think, here's what's going on. Then I don't have to make amends for making bad choices as a parent and making mistakes, right? So I pause, and my sons know that, and I even admit I'm afraid I'm not objective right now. I'm not objective. I can tell you another story. My oldest son, a couple of years ago, decided he was going to live on Loveland Pass in the winter in his truck. Okay? Swear to God. And he comes to me and he says, Dad, I got this idea. And he started to sell me on it, and I felt, what did I feel, right?
Fear.
I felt afraid. And what am I afraid of? You're going to die. You're going to die. You're going to asphyxiate, you're going to freeze to death, or something bad's going to happen to you on the side of the road. And so he comes in, he wants my support. And I'm going, Zach, I cannot. I'm scared. And here's what I'm scared of. Asphyxiation, death. I said, and so I can't support you because I don't think it's in your highest and best interest. So I can't give you what you're looking for. And he looks at me and says, okay, Dad, how can I make you feel more comfortable? Because I really want you to participate in this with me. That's a pretty adult choice, isn't it? See, and that's after years of practicing these principles. He's not afraid of my fear and that I'm going to mismanage it, and he's willing to listen. Both my sons know that if I don't think something's in their highest and best interest, I can't do it. I can't support it. And so I thought about it. I said, we got to do some research how not to asphyxiate in your back of your truck. And so we're going along, and a friend of mine from my home group did exactly what my son's getting ready to do, right? He lived out of his truck, and there's a whole culture, a whole lifestyle. They all live in Walmarts in the parking lots, right? And turns out there's this deal. And so I go, well, I got a friend, Zach, that volunteered to come over and check out your plan and talk to you about it. So he did. They met, and I went in the house and let them work it out. And my friend comes in and says, he's got a plan. It's going to work, right? So, but then I still had to let go and trust that I wasn't going to now the hardest fear inventory that I've had to write with myself or others, and unfortunately I've had to write it a number of times, is the fear of somebody I love is going to die. All right? You guys get this, I think. You guys get this, because if you're got an alcoholic in your life and you're not afraid they're going to die from self-destructive behavior, then maybe we haven't really gotten down to what we're really talking about. Okay? So the hardest fear, and I've written this fear in my own life several times, and so I do what I can do. I meditate and pray. Say, God, is there anything I should? If God told me, don't let your son do this, I would not let my son do this if I could stop it. He's an adult man, I can't. But I could get in his way, big time, right? I did not get that intuition. I did not get it. And so I asked God to remove my fear. I turned my thoughts to, if he dies, I'm going to be sad. I'm going to be sad, but I'm going to believe that I had done everything that I could do. And that one clear idea of God's will is that he's entitled to make his own decisions. He's an adult man, immature and stupid sometimes, but he's entitled to make his decisions and have his consequences in life. And it's a disservice for me to take that away from him because I'm afraid. See, when I'm working with alcoholics that can't stop drinking, taking away their pain and trying to coddle them is a disservice. See, because I'm not. They have it. You know, when I sit across from an alcoholic and I get a clear sense that they're going to die, you know, I sit back and do everything I can say until I feel the hair on the back of their neck raise up, and then I sit back and I think to myself, I honor your choice to die, because God, in God's world, people die, and it's all right. See, and if I'm aligning with my will with God's will, and I can't let anybody in my world die, then I got a problem. I can't trust God if people die in God's world. See, now 4 months before I got sober in 1986, my brother committed suicide, and so I came into Alcoholics Anonymous in a grief process with alcoholism killing my brother, and so that's why I am saying what I'm saying, because my concept of God had to get big real fast, because I did not trust God, and people I loved could die. And when they told me that I needed to trust God, I said, all right, how? Because God didn't give between a bullet and my brother when that day came. Mm-hmm. And you want me to trust God? Mm-hmm. Well, I couldn't handle the outcome. Guess what? Some of that was selfish. Because, see, what I was really afraid of when somebody I love is going to die is they're going to think I'm a bad father. They're going to think I'm a bad husband or boyfriend or something like that. They're going to blame me because I didn't do something. That isn't me thinking about anybody else. That's me thinking about what's going to happen to me. See? And suddenly, when I'm doing the fear inventory process, I'm starting to get down to not the unselfish aspects of my fear, but the selfish aspects of my fear. Well, I just love him and I want him to be all right. Bullshnarky. I want to look good. And I don't want anybody to blame me in case I made a mistake. And I don't want to die from the grief that I'm going to feel. See, that's what I'm really afraid of. My pain, getting blamed, somebody thinking it's my fault, and that kind of stuff. And when I get rid of that stuff, when I get rid of my own fears that have to do with me and not the other person, guess what happens? I start to hear God talking to me. And if there's actually something I'm supposed to do, I might be able to hear it, right? And when I show up and talk to somebody that's in that kind of dangerous situation, and I'm not vested in whether they live or die, guess what happens? They listen to me. They hear me without being defended, and I have a chance to be of service. So I got to this concept of God through this inventory process, and then I started attracting suicidal people into my world. It's like, come on, right? Well, because I could sit down across from them, and I wasn't afraid of making a mistake, and I wasn't afraid if they died, and that kind of stuff. And I've lost people in this program. I've lost people, a number of people in the last 32 years, that people have come to my house every day for weeks and years and months, and they die. They stop coming and they die. And it's sad. But I don't die from the grief. I'm not afraid of the grief. I'm not afraid of what anybody says or thinks anymore. After countless fear inventories. And that's why I can go into these dangerous, scary situations and not be self-seeking in the process. As soon as I become attached to an outcome when I'm working with somebody, I'm compromised. I'm less effective than I would be if I wasn't afraid. So, we're willing to admit we're afraid. Now what do we do? That scare anybody? Okay. We reviewed our fears thoroughly. Okay? We put them on paper even if we don't have a resentment in connection with them. Okay, I paraphrase that because it's confusing sometimes. We put them on paper even though we had no resentment and connection. So some of my fears have pissed me off. Okay, now a smart person that hangs around this program learns it's a bad idea to get pissed off because your sponsor makes you do work. And they talk about you in meetings when you're angry, and they start to figure out you're not recovered if you're angry. So we act like we're not angry. Okay? Then we don't have to write inventory, and we don't have to admit we're afraid. We just say we're hurt or we're upset. It's like Bolshnarky, right? This is me dodging the line that I need to be in because it's pissing me off. So some of my fears, and if I get angry, my second or third thought, hardly ever my first thought. My first thought, your fault. It's your fault. You made me angry and you're bad. That one lasts for 32 seconds now. My next thought is, what am I afraid of? What am I afraid of? Okay? I think I said last week I was standing toe-to-toe with a contractor one time, arguing over this, and I thought to myself, what's he afraid of? As I'm yelling at him, I don't always look good when I'm practicing the program. Sometimes I don't practice the program, but I'm yelling at this guy. I thought to myself, what's he afraid of? And then a thought came right in. He's afraid he's not going to get paid. Right? So I stopped mid-sentence and I said, I'm going to pay you. But first, I need you to do this, this, and this. And he said, all right, and did it. That was it. Totally, I mean, he just changed his personality completely, right? We joke that I wrote inventory and the other person changed, right? And everybody laughs when you say that in a meeting. In my world, I write inventory and people change. It's real. When I am not in self-will, the people around me are different. And I can change that in a sentence. Literally. I can change it in a sentence. It's indirect. It's indirect manipulation, whatever you want to call it. I call it spiritual kung fu, right? Where I can do this spiritual work, shift my state of being, and change the situation or the people living in it. Okay? That's how powerful this is. So I'm not exaggerating here because this is a big deal. And if this isn't done, if this isn't done enough, the desired outcome that we're after when we're doing the steps doesn't happen. One of the saddest things that can happen to a person doing the 12 steps is to not get the promise. It promises all the way through this, the promises in the end that we're entitled to, and everyone in here is entitled to that. But we have to overcome the spiritual malady. See, if I'm trying to be loving and caring of service to my son while he's making a boneheaded decision, the spiritual malady is I don't trust God in the possibility that my son can get harmed or die, right? And if it's God's will, and near as I can tell, in my world, God gives us free will. So if I want to go climb mountains and jump off cliffs and skydive and roll the dice with my life every time I get in a car, God says, all right, that's fine, right? And so if I'm going to align my will with God's will, that's what I got to be capable of doing with other people. So we put them on paper, okay? So where's our book on?
Yeah, right here.
Okay.
Real quick, for those of you that weren't here last week, Candy, right? Candy offered to do a resentment inventory. It's on those first 2 pages. So it's the same as it is in the big book. Who made me upset, concerned, resentful, angry? And Chris brought out it can be a person, a principal, or an institution. The second column is what happened. And Candy said that her son-in-law stole her grandson. And Chris encouraged her not to look at it like in an overinflated way. So then what came out was that her son-in-law changed the plans and she didn't have time with her grandson. That's a very important column, and there's prompts for it. So we look at security, fear, self-esteem, ambition, money, sexual relations, personal relations, and there's prompts for those. They're in the handouts that we handed out. And then my part, the exact nature of our wrongs. And I think Candy found this very, very helpful because suddenly she could see what she brought to that party that was not helpful. So our intention tonight is now to take the fears out of the resentment inventory and work it through the fear inventory so you guys can see how to do that.
Are you comfortable with that?
Are you good
2
with
weeks
it?
in a row.
You're good?
Yes, I'm fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Cool.
All right, can I use your marker real quick?
Yes.
Okay, so we identified a couple of fears. My grandson will forget me. Right? Fear of not being a good grandma, that was part of it. What are the fear? Fear of my grandson should. Does that sound right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because that's few things spun off of that. We talked about that being concerned with what's going to happen in the future, some passive aggressive lie and all that. All right, well, let's just work with, you want to write, Alice?
Sure.
Better at that. So fear that my grandson will forget me. Does that sound? Now notice how we take it right out of there. Now, one mistake I see people make when they're writing inventory is they think that this is a whole new chapter and they just go into brainstorm. I think I'm afraid of the sky falling, right? There's no continuity to the original resentment. So fear that my grandson's going to forget me is how this affected me, right? That's has direct continuity with the resentment in which I was angry with at first. Okay, now sometimes I can have fear, like I didn't get angry at my son when he wanted to live on the mountain, okay? I felt fear and I could recognize it, and so I had fear. So you don't have to have a resentment to do a fear inventory, okay? It's okay to do it. I think it's a productive exercise, okay? Because the fear inventory helps me break down what's going on with it. It begins the process to digest to get to the root cause of the problem, okay? So when in doubt, write all 4 columns of resentment and then write the fear inventory, okay? Okay?
Not dying.
All right, not dying.
It's okay if you die. People die.
That's recorded, Alice. We asked ourselves why we have them. Okay, why did we have the fear? All right, so the whole second column is why do I have it? So I'm going to give you 2 questions or 2 lines of thinking that I use when I'm in the second column. One is I ask myself if-then questions. If my grandson forgets me, then what? What outcome of that do I fear? And the second line of question is there a historical reason for this? Okay, I lost a puppy when I was a kid. My other daughter wouldn't let me see my grandson, so now I'm not afraid to see this one. Those kinds of things. I'm afraid of dogs because the dog bit me when I was 9. Okay, that connects. So there could be a historical reason. It's really easy to delve into family of origin and find somebody to blame, which serves no purpose here. I own it now. Regardless of where it came from, it's on me. And it's not going to change unless I take ownership. But it's good sometimes. The mind really likes to know where this stuff comes from. It thinks that's cool or something. It's not necessary to know that. But anyway, okay. So let's just stop and ask. If my grandson forgets me, we kind of covered this a little bit last week, right?
Right.
If my grandson forgets me, then what?
Then break my heart.
Good, exact. Then I'll be heartbroken. What's the appropriate feeling to have when somebody you love is in pain?
Heartache.
Heartbreak.
Heartbreak.
I had to learn that from a therapist in marriage counseling. Right? Somebody was crying, and she said, "Oh, it breaks my heart to see you in pain." It's like, that's what I feel. Right? Now, I'm not going to die from heartbreak. Right? But if I'm going to be in relationships and other people are going to have pain, I'm going to feel it. See? What isn't okay is when I need to change you because I'm heartbroken. I need to fix you because I feel pain. Does that make sense?
Yes.
But in this case, it's not them, is it? It's you.
Right.
You're going to feel pain.
Right.
feel heartbroken. So let's see if we can name that a little bit closer. My grandson forgets about who I am, right? What are you going to feel closer to that, right? I'm a bad grandmother.
Right.
Right?
Well, and
Nobody loves me.
Right, yes, and, just the fact that I could be beneficial in his life, I can make a difference, and if he's not in my life, or I'm not in his life, then that isn't gonna happen, My impact will not be felt, I guess.
Right, but if your impact is not felt in his life, then what?
I don't know, it makes me feel like a big loser.
There you go.
Good.
I'm a loser. Boom. Okay, now all of a sudden, now we're into self-esteem. See? Uh-oh. Am I supposed to get my self-esteem needs met by children?
No.
Good luck with that, by the way.
Right, really. I have two.
I guarantee you they'll find a way to smash that. I'm riding home with my second grader, right? He's got a second grader, first grader. Got a brand new teacher, and in his school at Waldorf, where he was in Waldorf, the teacher stays with him for 8 years. And we're riding home to do a home visit where he's going to show his teacher our house and that kind of stuff. First thing out of his mouth, my dad's an alcoholic. Like, okay, yeah. The teacher, fresh in from Germany, goes, oh, interesting. Okay, I'm a loser, right? And if everybody I love wants to run away from me, I'm also unlovable, is the
Yeah.
phrase that I get to.
Yeah.
Okay? So let's put that one down. I'm unlovable. Now, this is different teachers, different people have different words for what does it feel like when nobody loves me? What does it feel like when everybody excludes me or runs away from me? That kind of stuff.
Like you don't exist.
Exactly. See? Now, what I believe when we have these kinds of beliefs, I'm a loser or I'm unlovable, and something externally happens that validates that to be true, the feeling I feel is shame. Okay? See, because how big a fear does it take for me to abandon my son who's making me afraid? Right? To get angry at him and say, get out of here, you're making a stupid decision, I can't watch this. How big a fear is that for me to abandon somebody I love? And I am capable of it. Right? It's huge. It's huge.
Yeah.
See, because under fear, go ahead.
She just said some.
I'm gonna die.
That's what it feels like,
See?
doesn't
And
it?
until I could finally put some of these fears in that magnitude, and here's how I know this, okay? What's our first instinct in these scary situations? I'm going to fight my son-in-law. Here we go. Or I'm going to run away and leave, fight, flight, or I'm going to disassociate and freeze. Right?
Right.
Pretty documented that that's a survival instinct. Okay? Hugely disproportionate to the current situation, isn't it? Nonetheless, it's a survival instinct because I want to fight you, I want to run away from you, or I'm going to pretend you're not even there. And then I don't care. Fight, flight, or freeze. Okay? That tells me how big a deal this is. And I believe, it's not true, but I believe when I feel shame, I'm going to die. When I feel abandoned and somebody's going to leave me alone, or my grandson's not going to love me, when I was going through co-parenting with my children, and they wanted to spend more time with their mom than they did with me. Holy buckets, darn. I got to trust that they're going to like me when they're adults. They do. But it was touch and go. It was scary, right? And I truly understood for the first time why a man would want to walk away and abandon his kids. Because the pain was so excruciating to keep showing up and having that stuff come up over and over again. It's like, screw it, I'm out of here. That's the magnitude of some of these feelings. Fear of abandonment, fear I'm going to die from shame. When self-esteem stuff starts making me do things, That's the magnitude of this fear. And so when I get to the solution, oftentimes my prayer work includes literally taking away the fear of dying. Okay, now here's where your logical mind says, I'm not really afraid of that. That's not true. I know I'm not a loser. I know that my son's not going to abandon me. You're arguing with two different parts of yourself at this time. You're using your conscious mind, because this isn't probably a current event. This is probably a pattern in my life, right? It's historical. And I'm trying to use my logical mind to tell the subconscious or the other part of me that's afraid it's not real. Okay? And I get into this circle of going around and around. And I can delude myself into thinking I'm not afraid, right? When I really am. That's dangerous. Because now I go out and try to act like I'm not afraid when I am. And it keeps coming up over and over and over again. The nature of cycles and patterns in relationships over and over, okay? So I got to get down to really what's going on here if I want to show up and be a different person in future situations, okay? So anything else? See, that kind of gets it. So now suddenly we've got new fears. Fear that I'm going to be abandoned, or fear I'm going to feel shame, right? Fear that I'm going to die from the shame, that kind of thing. And the thought that I didn't finish is that I can't use my logical mind or expect my fears to be logical and rational. Okay? If I expect my fears to be logical and rational, I'm going to spin my wheels working on it. Give yourself permission to have illogical fears, irrational fears, and disproportionate reactions to real life events. Okay? Then I don't expect myself to be not more than human. Okay. So anything else? So is that kind of helping a little bit?
Yes.
So we got back to some more self-esteem stuff. We got back to some bigger fears. So you've heard the layers of the onion being peeled back, right? It's getting peeled right now. Okay? It's like, oh, I thought I was angry at my son-in-law. Now I'm afraid my grandson isn't going to love me. Now I'm unlovable, right? And I need my grandson to tell me I'm not a loser by showing up and being a part of my life, right? One of my hardest core beliefs to overcome in recovery is I'm a failure, right? Everywhere I went, as a father, as a businessman, in love relationships and friendships, failure, over and over again. And if everybody leaves me, if nobody likes me, it validates that I'm a failure. Okay? These are the kind of things that start to show up. And I consider those to be defects of character. I consider these things to be defects of character because when I'm unlovable, you people scare me. Connecting and receiving love from people when I'm unlovable is painful. Take an orphan child and put them into a loving family, they should be happy, right? What actually happens? They run away. They act out. They thought they wanted to be in a loving family their entire life, and now they have to recoil from it, okay? Because it's painful. When I've lived with a concept of God that's conditionally loving, capricious, judging, and retaliatory, right? Punishing. Going into an unconditionally loving concept of a higher power that isn't fear-based feels like it's so intense I can't stand it. It's getting in the sunlight.
I want to make sure I'm following you. The character defect is not so much I'm unlovable, it's the belief that I have that I'm unlovable.
Yes.
That's true. And what I like about this process is, and you guys, if you go to meetings with me, you've heard me say I can't behave myself. And why I say that is because these beliefs will push my behavior. The behavior itself is not really the problem. What I believe to be true is the character defect, that I believe I'll be abandoned. That causes the behavior that gets me into trouble. So trying to address this at the level of behavior, which I did for 40 plus years, I tried really hard to behave myself. Holy crap. It didn't work very well.
Yeah, there's some semantics that people could say, well, this is the false belief, or this is not true. and that kind of stuff. And I'll tell you, I've prayed it both ways. Where if it goes in here and I put I am in front of it, whether it's real or not, I believe it to be true. And that prayer works better. Anything, go metaphysical a little bit. Two most powerful words in the universe, I am. Anything that follows I am is true. Okay? And that's a danger sign. Okay, so I do this stuff with I am statements. And when I pray with I am statements, because this is bad news. This is not a fun place to be, is it? Right? I'm scared and I haven't got a solution to my fear at this problem. But when we get into the next column, then we can get into the new idea that's going to replace it.
The character defect is the belief.
Yes.
Okay. Now, if you go next door, you'll find 52 people that'll tell you a defect of character, and it's all different. Okay, I'm not trying to define defects of character. Does that make sense? I mean, it's a very subjective.
Yeah.
Okay, in my perspective, when I'm asking God to remove something that's a root cause of my problem, my core belief and the fear associated with it, as opposed to asking for the behavior to be removed. Does that make sense?
Yep.
But I don't want to. It'll be debate. If you go into another meeting and say my defect carries this, you'll get arguments and pushbacks.
Right.
I don't want to argue. I just am trying to clarify.
Yeah, but in my perspective and the way I do the work, that would be a defect of character and the fear associated with it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you pray for please remove the core belief that I am unlovable and that I will be abandoned, or remove the character defect.
I would word it, remove the belief that I'm unlovable and my fear of being abandoned. That's how I would do that. And that's half of the prayer. The other half is what I'm going to put in place of it. Okay, which we haven't got to yet.
And it's 6:30, I know, because I heard the meeting close next
Sorry,
door.
guys.
So we can do one of two things. We can keep going, or we can come back next week and kind of stay with this deep dive into step 4 and finish it next week. I don't want to keep people here longer than they were expecting to be here.
I'm gonna need the process some of this. So
Okay,
might
cool.
be, at least for me.
Awesome.
I have to be downtown and I really wanna
You want to be here with,
I
yeah.
wanna be
Yeah,
here.
cool. Then I'm going to suggest that we stay in step 4 till we're done with step 4, and we'll be completing the fear inventory next week. That work for everybody? All right.
I only made 2 paragraphs.
Yeah, you did great, Chris.
I said I'm sorry, but actually I'm not.
Yeah, it's okay. It's
This stuff's
okay.
too important.
Yeah. It's a really, really, really important step to understand. And one thing I want to add to what Chris was saying is people work the steps the way they work the steps, right? So, you hire yourself up a sponsor, you're going to get the recovery that person has, right? Because that person can't give you something else, right? When I work steps with people, this is my process because Chris is my sponsor. It's okay with me. It's so okay with me. If that doesn't work for some folks, it's just fine. But what we can give you is what we have, right? Not what we don't have. So you can keep that in mind too. If you have, if some of this bothers you, you don't agree, that's perfectly okay. Perfectly okay.
What does that say? I will die of blank. I can't.
Of shame.
Of shame. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
So let's circle up and say a prayer, and then people can go.